listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast by Dr. T. Michael W. Halcomb, Dr. Fredrick J. Long, Dr. Mario Melendez, Dr. Jennifer Noonan, and J. M. Smith. Welcome and enjoy.
Hello and welcome to Proof Text. I am Michael Halcomb and I'm here with Dr. Fredrick J. Long, and we're excited to be with you. Thank you for watching and thank you for supporting the podcast. We're really grateful for that. We've been studying Galatians for a while, and in the previous podcast, we only got one verse done. We've been doing this like 2 verses at a time, but we got talking about love, and it was worth going on that tangent, so to speak. I don't know if there are tangents, but everything seems kind of connected anyway. So we're at Galatians 5. Today we're going to pick up at Galatians 5:14. Is that right?
Yep.
5:14. And if you're watching, I'm going to show it on the screen here in just a moment. Fred, I got a question for you before we get started. Again, another tangent. Probably shouldn't have asked it, but it just came to mind. I was at the physical therapist today, and this guy is another patient. He walks in, and he's talking to the therapist, and he says he had to fill out an online application to be a math tutor, a local math tutor. He says there are all these different kinds of questions, but one of the questions was, if you had the chance to go back in time and talk to your 15-year-old self, what would you tell yourself? Like, what piece of advice would you give now with all these years, all this wisdom behind you? What would you say to your 15-year-old self?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've heard something like that before, but
Yeah. No, I would. There's a carnal part of myself that would say, invest all the money you played in quarter video games in Google.
Interesting. All right.
But I think more seriously is learn Greek. Like learn biblical languages.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Wow. The guy said that his response was, just relax.
Yes.
I found that pretty interesting, right? Just relax, like, chill, take it easy. So for if you're listening or watching, what would you go back and tell your 15-year-old self? Leave us a comment or email us, or whatever. Very curious to hear what some of you folks would say to your 15-year-old self. So anyways, we're at Galatians 5, as I said, and we're looking at verse 14. So let me get this on the screen here. We'll read it and then get going. So here we go. If you're just listening, that's fine too. If you want to get out of Greek Testament, that's fine too. Here we go. Ogar pas nomos en eni logo. Peplerote endo agapesis ton plesion su oseafton. All right. I don't have a lot to say here. I kind of like tripped up for just a second on the N and E. That duplication almost going on there, but and then you have indo. Remember, when a word ends with an U and the next word begins with a tav in quine, it makes the T, the tav, sound like a kind of a soft D. Indo, and you run them together like that. Indo. And then also you have plesion su, which su is throwing its accent back on plesion, so you're going to pronounce those as if they're one word. Plesion su oseafton. That's got like a really interesting ring to it, right? Plesion su oseafton. Plesion su oseafton. Plesion suo se afton. It's almost like a tongue twister there. Very, very fascinating. Agapesis ton plesion suo se afton. Very beautiful. Yeah. So, Fred, what do you see in?
Well, it's interesting to see the argumentative development. I mean, you have the gar in verse 14, which marks strengthening to the previous claim, which was a corrective statement. Don't use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love, serve one another. Through love, serve one another for. So verse 14 is strengthening that every law uh, is fulfilled in one word, one matter, or one idea. And then he says, in this, in this, there's a en to. The to is the article, but I would probably, it's a determiner, it's a pointer, and basically it's teeing up even higher the NNE logo. So the NNE logo, ento, namely. So, I mean, it's probably often translated as namely, or I guess I see the NASB says in the statement, which would be maybe equivalent as in this. But we want to just point out that there is objectification, identification, specification in this construction. In this, it's really teeing it up in a big way. And then you have, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So it's interesting that Paul is engaging in really fulfillment language. Fulfillment is fulfilled. This is culminated.
Yeah.
Basically boiling it up to the basic idea, and the not boiling it down, but boiling it up. Like this is what it comes up to. This is what it builds up to. Every law. And I find that interesting because in verse 12, he's been talking about those disrupting you. Well, and what way are they disrupting? How were they disrupting? They were disrupting, presumably, in terms of law practices of some kind, or coming under the law. And we've talked about that in the past, coming under the law. And so that whole discussion kind of comes back to the surface again when Paul says, and every law in one word. So you have this contrast between every, pas, and any, one. So pas nomos, any logo, or it would be is logos. So is logos, one law or one word, versus pas nomos, every law. So there's a contrast between the many or the all inclusive scope and the singular boiled up command or word, which is itself one of the commands found in Jewish Torah from Leviticus. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now the future there, you shall love, is an upgrade from the imperative mood. So there's different ways that you can form commands or exhortations. They can be direct, they can be indirect. Modally, you can use often the imperative mood. That's the default. You can also prohibit, use a prohibition form, which is the may with the subjunctive, the negative word may. So that's one way to say don't do something, to prohibit something. But when you use the future indicative, the indicative mood is a mood of statement of fact. It is in my estimation, an elevation of modal expression to make it even more salient or prominent. Um, and I think this happens if anyone has kids, has raised kids, or has kids, you understand this. If a parent says, go clean your room, that's obviously issuing a command. Let's say they say, you will clean your room.
Mm.
That is an elevation up. So I think this you will or you shall, and that's kind of the shall is a English convention to try to render the imperatival force of this future indicative. Yeah, so I just think that this flipping to the indicative makes it more prominent. It's kind of the same thing happens with the ou may in the subjunctive, which is an emphatic negation construction. It doubles the two negative words in Greek, the ou and the may, and then the subjunctive. But sometimes you'll have that with the future indicative. That is an elevation in prominence. So I see this. I know this is translating this is using the Septuagint for the Hebrew, and the Hebrew probably uses imperfect, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm guessing. So there are translational things going on here, but I think the pragmatic effect in the Greek language is elevation of prominence, and this is where you might expect it. So the Ten Commandments in Greek use the future indicative in the Septuagint. And here, this is from Leviticus. So you will love your neighbor as yourself, or you shall love your neighbor as yourself. It makes it more concrete. Yeah, and this is great. I mean, this is amazing. Jesus, when asked what's the greatest commandment, he says there are two. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. These two, the law, he says, the law is these two. I forget how he phrases it, but we'd have to look at that. So where is Paul getting this idea? And Galatians is early. So he's probably aware of the Jesus tradition at this point. Yeah, I don't think that he's just winging this, like, this is my own wisdom here. I think he's drawing on the gospel tradition at this point, and the Jesus tradition. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I was gonna say just a couple things about this. So the first is that um, if we think back to the previous episode on Galatians where I was defining love as wanting God's best for the other, I think it's interesting here, every law is fulfilled in this, right? You love your neighbor as yourself. So there is a sense in which I kind of alluded to it in the last episode that wanting God's best, not just for the other, but also for self, wanting God's best for me. And a lot of times I do things that are not in that vein or in that interest, self-interest rather. So I think that definition works really, really well here, actually. And what it looks like to want God's best for somebody else, like, is loving them. The second thing I want to say is that this is another reason why I don't have a negative view of the law, like that the end of the law, right? Every single law, every bit of the law was with this goal in mind, to love your neighbor as yourself, to want God's best for your neighbor. The problem started to occur, not the problem with the law itself necessarily, but the interpretation and use or misinterpretation and misuse of the law, so that it became no longer leading to wanting God's best for someone else, but removing their freedom and enslaving them, right? So I guess I have a very positive view of the law when I'm reading Paul. I don't sort of take that negative, like a negative view of the law. I really resist that when I hear the law sort of getting like beat up on or poo pooed on. I just don't see it. I don't see Jesus having that attitude. I don't see the psalmist having that attitude, and I don't see Paul having that attitude. I
Yeah.
I, I think when kept in proper perspective, the law, this is its end, is that we would love one another as we do ourselves, or want God's best for the other, just as we should ourselves. So that's the other thing I wanted to say. We don't have to get bogged down in that, but
No, it's very helpful. I think, yeah, I
yeah,
yeah, I think how to again, having God's perspective on it, God's, what is God's will? We want that for ourselves. We should want that for ourselves. We should want the best for ourselves. But that best is God, and that best is to be good. And so we want other people to be good and have the best relationship with God possible. So you want
yeah,
them, that's the best thing, is to have is to have a great relationship with God. So how do we have that relationship with God? What does that look like? What does that entail? So love your neighbor as you love yourself. So we pray for them in that same way. Yeah. And hope.
yeah.
How about verse 15?
Yeah, let's go. It says, "Ide allelus dacnete ke katestiete vlepete me up allelon analothete." Oh man, lots of ete going on there. Pretty fascinating. I don't really have anything other to say here in terms of pronunciation, so we can move forward. Yeah.
Yeah. So either, but if, um, and I think the conjunction "dad" there marks distinctive development. Now, here it just so happens to be a contrastive development that we might want to say, but. So this seems to be um, providing a hypothetical that is in contrast to what has gone before. Uh, but if you bite and devour one another, and the one another is interesting because that's a reciprocal pronoun. So if you get into
Mhm.
this mode of biting and devouring, and I like the word devouring, is always kind of fun. It's
Mm,
kat estheo. Estheo means to eat, and the kat means down. So to gobble down, to eat
mm.
down. We talk about gobbling up. They talk. The Greeks conceptualize it as very physically. Uh, I mean, I think when we gobble it up, we're taking
We
it from
would
the
say
table.
scarf down. Yeah,
Yeah,
scarf down.
we say scarf down, but when we gobble it up, I think we're taking it up and putting it in our mouth. That's gobbling it up, whereas we scarf it down. Yeah, so this is devouring, and this is a condition. It's a present, I think, a present simple condition. It has e, the connector e, with the indicative, present indicative, followed by a present imperative, which is kind of like the equivalent of a present time. So this is a present simple condition, just kind of laying out like this could happen right now. Like this is an alternative that is real for you right now in the present, and I'm going to lay it out. If you do this,
Hmm.
maybe if you continue in this, watch out that you're not consumed by one another. Um, so biting one another, you get consumed by one another. So the reciprocal pronoun occurs twice here, and in verse 13 it occurs as well. This is a concentration of reciprocal pronoun. There's only 100 instances of this pronoun in the Greek New Testament, and 3 of them are within 2 verses. We got to pay attention here about internal dynamics. Serving one another versus biting and devouring one another. those seem to be the options. What do you want to do? What kind of lifestyle do you want to have? And this language of biting and devouring and consuming, there's almost like a progression of ideas here: bite, uh, devour, to consume. So it's almost like the final effect is that you're consumed, you're exhausted. So it's interesting that there seems to be a development here, and that's part of the causal nature of a condition. If something, then watch out for that outcome. In this case, he says, "Watch out, lest you're
Beware.
consumed by one another." I immediately am thinking of the beastiness of this, and I think of
Mm,
C.S. Lewis's tremendous insight about the animality of sin and
yeah.
the humanizing nature of it. I guess you could also think of what's the Dr. Moreau's island, or the island of Dr. Moreau, which talks
Mm,
about these people being turned into beasts and degradation and that kind of stuff. Yeah, this is not good. We're acting like animals. And we get the consequences of that. We act like animals and we get devoured by animals. It's a very bad animal world out there, animals eating animals. And if you want to act like that, if you act like that, laying it out in the present tense, if you're acting like this, watch out that you aren't devoured by yourself. Yeah, very,
But it's
very
it's
interesting.
also, we shouldn't miss the contrast here with the preceding verse, where this is a stark contrast with it, that loving your neighbor as yourself looks like wanting God's best for them, whereas when you're only
Hmm.
concerned with what you want for yourself, you will bite and chew up and devour the next person to get whatever you want for yourself. Right?
Yeah,
It
you're
has
violating boundaries,
it
literally.
has yeah, it has no interest. It has no interest in loving the other person, right?
The
That is wanting God's
longevity,
best for them. Yeah.
their longevity, their integrity, and their lastingness, the longevity and integrity. You're violating that,
Yeah,
and
this
you're.
is
It's it's curious. I'm wondering why he moves to this metaphor of
and then
animality. Is it is it is it evoking food
yes, because
laws?
he's getting ready to talk about one, the fruit of the spirit, but
Okay.
really he's also gonna talk about the flesh, right? So
Hmm.
I contrast the fruit of the spirit with the fruit of the flesh. The two very, very different things, and when you partake of one versus the other, the outcome is dramatically different, right?
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah.
the fruit of the flesh looks like doing all these things for self gratification, whereas the fruit of the spirit, again, such things are no law, looks very much like loving the other and wanting God's best for them as you do for
Hmm.
yourself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
interesting. The doc nu um, is a harsh sounding word. That's the word for
yeah.
bite.
Yeah.
Definition: biting
It
of
almost has
snake.
like an onomatopoeic,
Docked.
uh, yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
almost like you do that. It doesn't feel good actually, but you
Even
can just hear docked.
co-
So it has to do with biting of snakes. Yeah.
mm,
Um,
which recalls Genesis, right? Perhaps. Um,
yeah. Yeah. So I
and
wonder what there's that the
the whole
class.
language of fruit and flesh here also recalls Genesis.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So the fruit of the spirit. I mean, who doesn't like a good food? You know, but we're to produce fruit, and then we can offer fruit to people, and they don't have to cut our limbs down and eat into our flesh, but we offer fruit. We speak
Hmm.
in ways that is unspoiled, uh, not to be spoiled fruit. Paul talks about don't offer up words that are spoiled, but rather
Hmm.
are beneficial for those who hear. He says that in Ephesians chapter 4. right around verse 27, 28, right around there, 25, 26. So yeah, offering fruit. I mean, who doesn't want to be fruitful and productive? I'm thinking of
Mm,
Psalm 1 too, right?
yeah.
So we don't sit in the council of the wicked or stand with mockers and that kind of thing. But blessed is the person who doesn't do that. But his or her delight is in the law of the Lord, and on that law they meditate day and night. They will be like a tree planted by streams of water, whose fruit is born in season. So
Mm,
having this fruit, I think this is blessing. I think this is offering goodness to people, being productive in a way that blesses, that brings life and wholeness and well-being, and respects the integrity of others. You're not overstepping. You're not.
mm.
You're you're producing fruit. Now there is a need sometimes to do pruning. Jesus talks about pruning to extend this metaphor out of fruit bearing. I know that's what we're going to get to next time. But
He's also not asking us to ignore bad fruit or rotten fruit.
yeah, we have, and you
'Cause-
have to identify it.
Yeah,
Yeah, you have to
exactly.
identify it. I mean, Jesus says you'll know them by their fruit. Talking about ministry kinds of things going on there, people prophesying in his name, doing miracles in his name, casting out demons in his name. He says, I never knew you. You'll know them by their fruit. So yeah,
Hmm.
and this is obviously bad fruit. So there's some devouring going on in the context of the Galatians. It's very interesting. He's forewarning them of that. I don't know if this is how this is being materialized. Is this being materialized in a food setting, kind of like what Paul dealt with Peter, that he had to confront him at the end of chapter 2? He confronted Peter to his face. So does the issue of the agitators, does the practicality of coming under the Jewish law, does that often really get felt and experienced at the dinner at a table fellowship setting? And my guess would be probably it does.
Yeah.
Probably it does. When the church comes together, and if you have people trying to be under the law with people who
Hmm.
don't, you're gonna. This is where it's really gonna manifest. People will be
Yeah.
revealed for what they are, and the convictions that they hold. Yeah,
Yeah. You
interesting.
can almost imagine him picking up an apple here while he's talking and taking a couple huge chunks out of it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's giving that sound, that crunch, the feel. Like I don't know, it's easy. Yeah. So I think so.
Yeah, intriguing. Yeah, this word consume, analisco, it really does mean like consume, like fire consuming something. Yeah,
Mm,
so it's a pretty strong word of destroying, um, like of what fires can do where there's nothing left. Yeah, not good.
mm, mm. Well, let's pause there and we'll wrap things up. Appreciate the insights. And Fred, do you have a parting shot for us?
Yeah, Dallas Willard.
All right.
Um, Discipleship is the process of becoming who Jesus would be if he were you.
That man, you keep doing these ones that are on topic with my sermon. I had a quote from Ernst Best that I shared in my sermon this past
Mm.
Sunday, and he says, um, "The first rule of discipleship is Jesus." And
Hmm.
he says every Christian should be as Jesus is, and that's the same thing you said, just in different words. I love that. Yeah.
Well, that's what Dallas Willard said. Yeah. So the
Mm,
life I live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. And really the word their body is flesh.
mm,
So we have to live in this flesh. That's Galatians 2:20. For I've been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. For life I live in the flesh, I live by faith or allegiance to the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Yeah. It's about
mm.
Jesus. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everybody for watching, listening, tuning in. Share this, like this, Subscribe. Go to Glossa House. Sign up for our newsletter. We're sending out a monthly newsletter, all kinds of like deals and new news of like new releases and things like that. We got a super spiffy, fast new website we've been running for a few months. So if you haven't been over there in a while, go check it out. Tons of new resources coming down
New
the
new
pipeline.
books.
Yeah, fall 2023. I mean, lots. And if
More
you've been
coming
listening,
down the pipe.
yeah, if you've been listening to the podcast on some of the Three Things episodes, you've heard me talk about the new Latin curriculum, 4 books in that series. It's a 2-year curriculum. We got 5 new Greek books, in level tier 1, 4 new Greek books and 1 tier 2 Greek book. We've got a new reader out that on the Testament of 12 Patriarchs. You got David Bauer's new book out on resources for biblical ministry or
That's been
biblical
selling
resources
like
for
crazy.
ministry.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
First Enoch is coming.
First Enoch, lots
Reader.
of just great stuff. So,
A children's
uh,
catechesis, and people are
yep,
loving it. So
yeah,
that's going to become marketed. I mean, be available maybe in about 3 weeks is what we're hoping.
got a new
So
prayer book coming out. All our dissertations are getting cover redesigned, so they look pretty spiffy. Lots of stuff going on here. Thanks everybody for supporting us. If you're going to be in San Antonio in November, we'll be at
yeah,
the SPL event. Come by and see us. We'd love
we're
to
both
meet
presenting
you.
papers, right? You're presenting, I'm presenting,
I'm actually not doing a paper, but I am presenting.
but yeah,
I'm performing Philemon in
yeah,
Greek. Yeah.
awesome.
So
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, Fred's giving a couple talks at IBR and one at SPL. So we got a lot going on. Come by and see us. Make sure you're in touch with us. If you have book proposals, bring them to us. Podcast ideas, but whatever, get in touch with us. We love hearing from y'all. Um, until then, we hope that helps, and aloha.
take care. Bye.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.